races is what Mississippi wants and Georgia wants, and on the basis of the record, what the country wants. Now, it isn't what I want.
Pardon me, doesn't Mr. X and the Muslim movement call for the separation of the races by having the Negroes all in certain states of America?
Yes.
Which is different from what the Mississippians want.
Well, what the Mississippians want is to have the Negroes separated while still working for
still in the same state.
In the same state.
Yes.
You know. Well, this is why the one is talking really about the nature of power, and I think one's got to make this clear. What the Mississippians have or think they have is power. What the Muslim movement wants is power. And I don't think that we can talk about it unless we're aware of this distinction, because of this reality. Because, again, what the Muslim movement is doing is simply taking the equipment, or the history, really, of white people with Negroes and turning it against white people. Now, in this country today and yesterday, it is terribly difficult to believe Americans have never proven that they really consider Negroes to be men. Now, from my point of view, this has done more to destroy white men in this country than it has done, quite apart from all these things we know about, the oppression and the ghettos and the lynchings and so forth. It has done much more to destroy the country than it has done to destroy Negroes. What I'm suing for, what I myself personally am suing for, is not a separation of the races. I don't believe in the first place in the races. And especially in this country, again, one is not in the situation of the Congolese fighting the Belgians. One is in the situation, whether white men or black men want to admit it, of fighting one's brothers and one's ancestors. And this is a reality which, no matter how hidden, will sooner or later come to light. When one takes the road to power, it seems to me that the white world proves this. One ends up where the white world is. What has happened in the country since World War II has not been because white people have suddenly changed their minds or become more generous or any of those things. What has happened is the power is beginning to shift. My concern is what will happen. What will happen when I, a Negro, no longer have you as my oppressor, but I'm responsible, altogether responsible, for what is happening to me, what kind of world I want. Now, I don't want to see the history of Europe, the history of the Western nations, repeated for another 1,000 years with a shoe on the other foot. The handicap one has in talking in this way is that there is no way to use the record, the American record or the record of the Western nations to prove this point. All the evidence really is on the side of the Muslim movement. What one can quarrel about and must quarrel about is the issue and where this will lead and what this means in terms of human beings who are finally neither white nor black.
Well, now, staying on that issue, if I may, and establishing here in a way that we can all agree upon how the Muslim intends to solve that issue, is it not correct that he stands not only for the separation of the races in separate states, but is opposed to integrations, opposed to the sit-down movement? Scholar, yes.
Well, there are two things here with which I differ violently. One is that all the evidence is on the side of the Muslim movement. That is in justification for this campaign of hate against white people. Now, I would like to offer that these 18 million some odd Negroes that you're talking about in the United States are the healthiest, the wealthiest, have the most property, the best educated, and the best informed group of Negroes in the world, and that includes all those in the Muslim countries. Now, we ought to get that thing straight. This is a matter of record. You don't have to no guesswork about it. And the next thing is, where is there anything in the Constitution or in anything that Lincoln said or wrote that says that a group has a right to part of the United States to take it off by itself? I thought that issue was settled 100 years ago.
I'd like to respond to one of the remarks made by Mr. Schuyler. In researching the black Muslim movement and talking with hundreds of people across the country, one of the things that I found consistently was the fact that since Negroes in this country are among the best educated non-white people in the world, since they have the leisure time to some extent to read and to study, and since they live in a society where there are all of these plus values available to the white man, I found that this is one of the things that is most productive of the kind of anxiety that makes for a Muslim movement. For example, we found that the fact that the Negro is so well educated produces a kind of chafing at the bit, because he cannot be a full-class citizen in terms of his education and in terms of his preparation. We find that with the emergence of black states in Africa and other non-white peoples in Asia and other parts of the world, that the American Negro has a sort of sinking feeling that if he isn't careful, he might be the last person in the world to attain the kind of status that would be equal with his education and his preparation. It is upon this kind of anxiety that the black Muslim movement feeds.
Mr. Lincoln, pardon me, Mr. Scholar, before we argue over the point, the first thing I think we should do is to get clear what the Muslims stand for. Now, Mr. Lincoln, you were explaining why people turn to the Muslim movement, which is important, but as I understand reading your book, you say flatly that black Muslims are emphatically opposed to passive resistance, as expressed by Martin Luther King. Or another quote, Muslims have only contempt for the Negro sit-in movement. Now, Mr. X, is that correct or is it not correct?
America itself is opposed to passive resistance. They didn't, America has never, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, America didn't resort to passive resistance.
Pardon me, I'm not talking about America at the moment. I'm talking about you, Mr. X, and your movement.
Yes, sir. I want to clarify that, because when they refer to us as non-passive, they make it look like we're committing a crime to be non-passive.
No, I'm simply asking, is Mr. Lincoln, our scholar on this subject, wrong or right when he says that you and your movement have only contempt for the Negro sit-in movement?
We have never voiced any contempt for the so-called Negro sit-in movement, because we don't voice contempt for movements. But if
when you use the phrase emphatically opposed, are you emphatically opposed?
We are opposed to forcing our way into a white restaurant where we are not wanted and forcing that man to serve us. We are opposed to that. Well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was our religious leader and teacher, teaches us that it would be wiser for the black people of America, instead of begging the white man for what he has and forcing themselves upon him, to try and get something for ourselves. And for instance, sir, if I force my way into a restaurant in Georgia and force the white man to serve me, I would be insane to let him go back in his kitchen and prepare my food, and then I sit down there and eat it after he's prepared it out of my sight.
Perhaps I am being stupid, but it seems to me you are not answering my question.
What is your question?
My question is...
Maybe I'm not giving you the answer that you want, the way you want it.
Is Mr. Lincoln correct when he says that you and your movement are emphatically opposed to the sit-in movement?
I say this: we are emphatically opposed to the methods.
How about the objectives?
If you want an integrated society, if an objective is to sit down in another man's restaurant and drink a cup of coffee, when you don't yet have a restaurant of your own, then we have to be against that type of objective, because after that Negro comes out of that restaurant, having drunk the coffee, where will he work? Where is his job?
Well, now, you are opposed to the means, you say, and I gather you're also opposed to the end because you are opposed to an integrated society. Is that correct?
The sit-in movement to us represents the intense degree of dissatisfaction that exists among the new generation of Negro and so-called Negro in America. As such, it is important because it shows that the present generation of students have lost their fear of the white man that was in the parent. 20 years ago, the average so-called Negro in America, if he resented Jim Crow or segregation, he would only manifest that resentment to the degree that he thought the white man would allow him to, or to the degree he thought he could do it without offending the white man. But
gentlemen, I have taken too much of the table's time. Mr. Baldwin?
I must say that this argument about integration versus segregation is just as unreal in terms of the Muslim movement as it is in terms of the Deep South or in terms of the country. In fact, one of the things in the record is that this has been an integrated country out in spite of the fact that it's been illegal or sub rosa. Integration is not something new. Again, we're not arguing about the aim of the sit-in movement is not to get a cup of coffee.